Hello, everyone. Oh, goodness. It's so hard to tell when this has gone live. Hopefully you can hear me. And welcome to another Flower Power show. Now, this week, I want to start with a poem. A fallen blossom returning to the bough. I thought, but no, a butterfly. This week, I'll be talking to you about these beautiful blossoming trees. I don't know where you live. They may be done blossoming where you are, but here in New Hampshire, we're at the peak of the wild, not the wild cherries, but the beautiful flowering cherries and crab apples and the wild apples and the apples in the orchards as well are at their peak blooming. And so I have been engaged in the ancient Japanese art, or tradition, I should say, of hanami, which is flower gazing. I did not know this is what I was doing until I looked it up. And so each spring, these just glorious trees burst into bloom, the cherries and crab apples, and it's just like nothing else. A whole tree in bloom. You know, I love daffodils and a perennial bed and so on, but there's nothing like an entire tree in bloom. So the bees love it. I was out in the garden the other day and the bumbles and everything just buzzing around. So like the whole sound of them just deliciously, greedily eating all of the nectar. It's just really a completely sort of sensual experience between the scent and the beauty and the sound. And I was really, really enjoying it. So this week I thought I would talk to you a little bit about the flowering trees and the history of those. And so these types of flowering trees are in the rose family, so the Rosaceae, and that includes all kinds of fruits that we love: peaches, pears, plums, and apples, cherries. Also some of the other trees that are more medicinal, like hawthorn and roses, of course, strawberries, blackberries, all kinds of things are in the rose family. And we have done a pretty good job as humans of taking sort of the wild versions of these plants and creating a bigger, more delicious fruit out of them. And that is just definitely one of the benefits of human plant breeding. In general, I like wild plants, but when it comes to fruits, we all know that we can get some really good stuff. Now, I brought in 3 different things to show you today, because this one here is a kind of a wild apple that I picked off the side of the road. A lot of apples just kind of escaped from orchards and grow wild along the side of the road here in New Hampshire and in other areas in the sort of temperate, northern temperate areas as well. Now, I believe apples are originally from, I forgot to look that up. I think they're originally from Turkey or someplace like that. More from the Middle East. This is a absolutely gorgeous crabapple tree that grows in my front yard. This is my view out my window right now. This giant mass of purple, pink, beautiful flowers that I was gazing upon the other day. And you can see on here, I think, let me see if this is a good example. The rose family all have this same kind of petal arrangement. There's 5 petals, and it's surrounding a big sort of cluster of stamens. I don't know how well you can see that. Cluster of stamens, and these sepals that kind of fold down around. And you might recognize that kind of sepal style from the way that, from a rose, like a rose that you might buy in the regular florist shop. Now, those are 2 big cultivars, but I also brought in to show you this sweet little thing. Here you might be able to see the little stamens sticking up, those little fuzzy stamens there. This is a wild black cherry that I have allowed to grow in my yard because black cherries are wonderful. And you can see again, the 5 petals, little stamens all around it. But there's a big difference between this blossom and these wild plants. And so you can see how we've selected, as humans, we've selected for these big, beautiful blooms to give us joy. And that is kind of the theme of our show tonight, is joy. But a little bit more about the plants. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the actual apples and fruits and everything that we eat is that they all come, each variety, whatever you get in the grocery store, pippins or whatever they might be, all of those came from sort of one original plant. And the way that apples and fruits are propagated, that they're cut and then they're grafted onto a rootstock of some sort. So all of the commercial varieties now are done that way, so that you get a guarantee that you'll actually get what the same variety. Growing from seed is extremely random, but it's this randomness that actually gave us all the varieties that we have today. And it's I'm going to put in another plug. I know I talked about it a couple weeks ago for the book, Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan. He has the most wonderful story in there about apples and the human sort of relationship with apples. And he talks about Johnny Appleseed. And really, we have all of these because of Johnny Appleseed. So he took all these seeds and planted them in orchards all around the Northeast, all the way out through Ohio and so on. There is I think it's a Disney version that shows Johnny Appleseed and making pies and cooking up some delicious cider. But truthfully, these apples were planted for hard cider. Okay, that is the purpose of planting all these orchards. But what happened over time was all of these diverse trees grew into sort of their own varieties, and maybe 100 years later, people went through these orchards that had been established and found all these different random apples growing and selected the ones, maybe 1 out of 100 was really, really good. So those got taken back, developed into a lot of the varieties that we know today. Now, we had hundreds of varieties 100 years ago, but if you go in the grocery store now, you see only a few varieties there. Just has to do with disease and all these different reasons why we don't have the variety we used to. But we won't get into that too much today. Mostly what I want to talk about. So because I'm really into the flowers and the blossoms this week, I'm just going to focus on one flower essence that I want to share with you. And that flower essence is what's in my yard, the crabapple flower essence. Now, this is partly because like I was out in my garden so much, I was just like, oh, I could talk about this plant, and oh, I could talk about that plant. And I couldn't pick one. I couldn't pick a card. I couldn't do this. So I just decided to go with these blooms. Crabapple is the flower essence. Now, cherries, this black cherry here, we'll be talking about that later this summer when the actual cherries are ripe on it, because there's so many wonderful things you can do with black cherry. So crabapple, according to Bach Remedies, crabapple is asking us to accept our imperfections by looking at the positive potential of embracing both through your body and mind. So like embrace instead of constantly criticizing it. It helps to clear away the sort of obsessive thinking about what's wrong with ourselves all the time, and to realize that we are actually beautiful in all our imperfections. We look at these beautiful plants, and I can guarantee you that there's a little nibble of an insect came in here, and there's a ripped off flower there, and those little sepals are not perfect on there, and yet we are in love with these beautiful flowers. And so we can look at ourselves like that. We are part of nature, and we are imperfect, and that's really okay. So the part of what crabapple also works on is this sort of feeling of like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm kind of unclean, I'm kind of, self yuckiness. Is that a thing? It is now. So it helps you to kind of help with your self-image and to feel more accepting of yourself. And another thing from Warrior Apothecary is that, and I love this, it says crabapple blossoms are used to help see ourselves as we truly are. The beauty that comes before the sour apples, especially crab apples. Most people don't eat those anymore these days, unless they're made into a jelly because they are super sour. So this is traditionally used to diminish feelings of self-disgust, being unclean and unworthy, when we have a hard time looking in the mirror with unrealistic criticism. This is an excellent flower to use, especially for like body dysmorphia or other self-love and acceptance work. Now, I've also used crabapple essence to just sort of appreciate, increase your appreciation for your personal space as well. And it can help to inspire you to sort of clean things up. But we always feel better when our house is neat and tidy and organized, and clutter can be very stressful and make us feel bad about ourselves. And so it can also be used just to help you sort of clean your entire environment, as well as feeling, you know, cleaner about yourself in general. So because I did not, let me see if I can find the card. I did pull a card from the Akashic Oracle deck. Where did you go, my dear? Where is it? I wrote it down, so I'll just read off of here. So it's this beautiful deck that has all this nice artwork on it by this woman, Mel Shap. Oh, here it is. Mel Shapcott. So this is like the gorgeous artwork that she does, and she made it into a card, and she wrote these different sayings. And the saying for this card today is, open my heart to joy. Now, nothing can make me feel more joyful than looking at these beautiful blossoms, right? So here is what the card has to say. When you are fully connected and engaged in your life, your heart brims with joy. It is not something that you can control. It happens naturally. Find ways to fill yourself up, treat yourself and your creativity more generously. Accept the opportunities that present themselves. Worry less about money and discover what really brings you happiness. So moving into joy. Joy is not from having a full bank account. It's from just savoring and being in those moments that bring you joy. So I just is so appropriate because, like I said, this is such an accurate depiction of how you feel when you're just allowing yourself to be completely immersed in apple, crabapple, and cherry blossoms and all those beautiful blossoms this time of year. And I like the word joy because happiness, we often create, it's often situational, right? Well, I'll be happy when, or that made me unhappy. It's much more, at least that's how we make it as humans. We connect happiness to specific events or expectations, but joy is kind of a higher, more of like a standalone state that we can decide to experience, right? We decide because we want to be joyful and surround ourselves in joyful things. We can do this by practicing hanami. We can be in the moment of joy so easily. So crabapple is telling us it's important to accept these imperfections of our world and ourselves. So how can we make this sort of flower gazing, this tradition of finding and viewing beautiful things and beautiful aspects of life and of ourselves? How can we make this into sort of a way of being? And how can you shift your view, you know, by choice every day, and to gaze upon things that make you feel joyful? So I hope you will spend some time contemplating these kind of small possibilities that can bring you greater joy in life. And perhaps you can start by doing some flower gazing of your own, whatever might be blooming in your part of the world right now. I hope you'll go out and do some gazing and smelling and just getting sensually connected with the gardens and the world around you. And that is all we have for our show tonight. If you're interested in getting more involved in a group of people where we go a little bit deeper on talking about plants and our connection to them, a little bit more into like herbal use and so on, you are more than welcome to join my Flower Power Facebook group. and I share other different tidbits in there. So I will put the link down below. Until then, this is Allison from the Well Cultivated Life, and I see you next week on Flower Power Live. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.